Welcome everybody to the last lecture series put on by 2024 class marshals. Welcome to the second installment with Professor Sharon Block. So last lecture series is just a time for a select group of professors to share words of wisdom and advice to the departing class. And it is my honor to begin introducing Professor Sharon Block. Professor Sharon Block is a distinguished scholar and expert in labor, employment, and administrative law. Prior to joining Harvard Law School, Professor Block played a pivotal role in shaping federal labor policy. She served in key positions in both the Obama and Biden administrations, most recently serving in President Biden's administration as a senior official delegated the duties of the administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Currently, Professor Block is a professor of practice and executive director of the Center for Labor and a Just Economy at Harvard Law School, where she leads collaborative research and policy efforts to empower working people and promote economic and democratic equity. Her experiences underscore her commitment to advancing labor rights and improving the lives of working Americans, thereby strengthening our democracy. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sharon Block.
Great. I first want to start off by saying how incredibly honored I am to have been asked to do this. I hope that I can live up to your expectations. Such a special time in your lives, in your law school career, and I'm really thrilled to share at least this time with you all. I also just want to clear up one thing. So on my little notes here, it says last lecture, and there was somebody from IT here before who saw that and said, "Oh, is this your last lecture?" And I think she looked at me and thought like maybe I was retiring. So I just want to be clear, this is like your last lecture, not mine. You haven't heard anything, right? Because I am the professor who brings a stuffed animal to class every day and sometimes hugs it and talks to it. And I have been known to say in public that I like bringing guests to my classes because it's a way to get HLS to pay for my play dates. I happen to have a lot of very interesting and great friends that I invite on those play dates, so I think I'm safe, but the whole last lecture thing has me unnerved a little. But assuming this is your last lecture, I will proceed. So there are a lot of ways to go in giving this kind of talk. I think I'm old enough, there's a lot of gray hair under here, with the model of I am going to pronounce wisdom. And when I was thinking about going that route, I thought back on all the graduation speeches that I've heard to see if I could find inspiration. And I kept coming back to the best advice I ever heard in a graduation speech. It was delivered at my son's college graduation. He went to Oberlin, and his graduation speaker was David Sedaris. If you all know David Sedaris, he's been called the modern day Mark Twain. Anyway, he delivered a great graduation speech. Only a few families walked out and discussed, and that was fewer than I thought were going to. But he gave the best advice. It was direct, pithy, and profound. He told the graduates, if you want to be successful in life, don't be an asshole. I can't really improve on that advice, but just repeating that sage admonition doesn't really take much time, so I thought I should probably come up with a few more things to say. So then I thought about what you all might be expecting me to say. So those of you who know me have probably heard me say frequently that I defy anyone to find someone who has loved their career more than I have loved mine. So you may be expecting me to just share with you all the great jobs I've had, and why I've loved those jobs so much. And I could do that. And if I went that route, I might try to lure you into a career in public service by telling you lots of stories about the best moments in my career in public service. I might tell you about the time I was sitting at the conference table in the Roosevelt Room in the West Wing of the White House when President Obama told me I was doing a great job. Or I might try to convince you that there's actually some glamour in pursuing a career in public service by telling you that somehow during the Obama administration, I ended up on the list for both the White House Christmas parties and the White House Hanukkah parties. And yes, the eggnog really is that good and that boozy. But I have to tell you, so I'm just an aside for a second. I want to tell you my favorite story from a White House Christmas party. I think it has particular resonance for law students. So one year, I brought as my +1 a young woman who worked with me at Department of Labor. She was amazing. She was doing great work for me and going to law school at the same time. And as you all know well, Christmas parties often coincide with exam season. So Amy, this young woman, anguished over whether she should come with me or not, as the party we were scheduled to go to was the night of her 1L con law exam. So she decided to throw caution to the wind and come to the party. So we're at the party, we've had some of the aforementioned boozy eggnog, and we spot Justice Sotomayor at the buffet table. So we try to suppress the most obvious signs of our fangirl feelings and decide to go up to her to tell her how much we admire her. So we walk up to her, and Amy then just blurts out, "I was just thinking about you because I'm in law school and I have my con law exam tomorrow." So Justice Sotomayor smiled at us and said, "I have a feeling you're going to do very well on your exam." It was like Amy had just been blessed by the law school pope. And would you believe it, after having to study all semester while holding down a demanding full-time job and going to a party the night before, Amy ended up getting the best grade in her section on that exam. So, I love that story. Okay, or back to my journey in coming up with what I was going to share with you today, I might tell you about the real best moments. Like when I went to a rollout of a Department of Labor rule to greatly limit coal miners' exposure to coal dust so that we could finally end the scourge of black lung. The event was at a community center in Beckley, West Virginia. And as we went through the event, the indelible memory that I have of that day was of the whir of the oxygen tanks that so many of the miners in the audience needed just to breathe. And then the thought that because of the rule that we were rolling out that day, in 10 or 20 years, someone could have a meeting of coal miners and you wouldn't hear that noise anymore because the next generation of miners would be free from the disease. Or I might tell you about the hope that filled my heart watching Terrence Wise, a second-generation fast food worker and a leader of the Fight for 15 movement, introduce the President of the United States in the East Room of the White House at the White House Worker Voice Summit. Or I might tell you about the sense of purpose and history I felt when I turned on my computer at 12:01 p.m. on Inauguration Day in 2021, knowing that I was going to be even a small part of rebuilding our government at a moment when the stakes couldn't have been higher. So I could go on and on. I have been so lucky to be a part of so many great moments and important work and to have served people who I believed are remarkable leaders like Senator Kennedy and Presidents Obama and Biden. All right, so one more aside. One thing I didn't really think about when I joined academia, because I've only been here for a few years, but that I have really learned to love is that I can keep telling the same damn stories because my audience keeps turning over. My family and friends are so tired of all of those stories, but each year I can tell them to you guys. Anyway, I love telling those stories and I love sharing my very strong belief that the way to have a great career, to really love what you do, is to really care about what you do. Not just to find it interesting or a challenging intellectual puzzle, or a path to a big office, or an even bigger paycheck. I mean, if those other things happen, great. But I've learned that what makes me happy, what makes me excited to get out of bed every day to go to work, is to feel like what I am doing matters, and that it matters in a way that I think is important. Now, if all those other things line up too, I'm not against them, good on ya. But if you can only choose one, choose doing what you really care about. So over my career, I've learned a lot from those moments I've just described to you. But I think actually that I learned the most about how much I've loved my career and about myself and what I wanted from my career, not only or even especially in the best moments, but I learned the most at the worst moment. At that moment when I had to make a big decision about whether I was going to continue on the path that I was on, or was I going to go in a different direction. And so I've decided to share with you today some notes from under the bus. You all know that term, getting thrown under the bus, right? It seems like a very DC phenomenon, but I'm pretty sure that it exists more broadly too. So we're in law school, so let's define our terms. To be thrown under the bus means to have your interests sacrificed to advance or protect the interests of someone or something that is more important or more powerful than you. It also connotes that this event happens in public. After all, buses rarely run in private behind closed doors. So you might not all know it, but you are actually probably familiar with some of the circumstances related to my unfortunate interaction with a bus if you've taken con law and read the Supreme Court's decision in Noel Canning, because I was one of the recess appointees that gave rise to that case. But I want to be clear. I don't believe that the Supreme Court threw me under the bus. By the time the decision in Noel Canning issued, I had long since clambered out from under the bus. In fact, the Supreme Court couldn't have thrown me under the bus, because central to that concept is that you can only be thrown under the bus by your own people. That push that sends you reeling into the path of oncoming traffic comes from someone you trust. That's why you don't see it coming. You are standing in front of someone, near someone you think is a friend or colleague, and suddenly you feel a slight pressure on the small of your back, and you realize that there is a bus running over you. So, how did I come to be under a metaphorical DC bus? Let me give you a quick rundown of the facts. First, you need to understand how appointments to the National Labor Relations Board work. Second, you need to understand a little bit about how the House and Senate work, and then you can understand how I ended up in your con law casebook. And I hope then we can draw some lessons from that experience. So the NLRB consists of 5 board members when fully constituted. It can carry out its business with just 3 members, but if its ranks fall below 3, the Supreme Court has said that it cannot conduct its business. That means that if there aren't 3 lawfully appointed members of the NLRB, American workers lose all protection for the right to join unions or act collectively. Board nominations have long engendered fierce partisan battles, with filibusters over those nominations the norm. During President Obama's first term, Republicans in the Senate had made clear that after Senator Kennedy passed away and Democrats lost a filibuster-proof majority, that they would likely block confirmation of any new board members. So when Congress adjourned in 2011, one of the board's remaining 3 members was going to turn into a pumpkin, and the board would go out of business for no one knew how long. President Obama needed 3 new nominees. That's where I enter the picture. The White House asked if I would be willing to be nominated. They thought that as a former Senate staffer, I would be a good choice because there was a long-standing tradition that senators wouldn't filibuster someone who came from within the Senate family. Both parties benefited from this practice, and the White House was relying on senators to show some respect for Senator Kennedy's memory by extending this courtesy to me. Ha! Republicans quickly made clear that they had no intention of confirming me or anyone else that would save the functioning of the board. So Democrats still controlled the Senate in 2011 and into 2012, so you might wonder why then Majority Leader Reid, why he didn't call a Christmas recess that would allow the president to use his recess appointment power to save the board. What the court doesn't tell you in the Noel Canning decision is that why Leader Reid seemed to be blocking a president of his own party from making appointments that Reid himself strongly supported. It's because it takes 2 to tango in the context of congressional adjournment that creates the recess. It wasn't just up to Senator Reid whether to adjourn the Senate or not. He needed the approval of the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, as well. And John Boehner decided to up the ante on the politicization of board appointments and refused to agree to the Senate's adjournment. That meant that Senator Reid was forced to hold the pro forma sessions that you read about in Noel Canning. Okay, let's get back to me. I got a call on January 4th, 2012, letting me know that President Obama was going to recess appoint me in the next hour or so. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. White House counsel literally told me to sit alone in my office until the paperwork was signed and the appointment was made public. In fact, I actually don't remember them asking me if I wanted a recess appointment. They told me it was happening. So that's what I did, and 3 days later, I was sworn in as a member of the NLRB. With all of that in the background, I went to work. As I expected, I loved being a board member. Earlier in my career, I had spent 10 years as a career lawyer at the NLRB. I knew the place and the people, and I loved all of it. I had issues I wanted to tackle. I had rules that I wanted to get out. I loved the story of people's lives that I found in the cases that I had to decide. And I knew that there were real people who were going to get a call from a board agent telling them that they were getting their jobs back, or they were getting back pay, or they were going to get to vote in a fair election because of decisions that I was participating in. The procedural issues related to my appointment would work themselves out. I told myself that was up to the Senate and the court, and so I put those issues out of my mind as much as possible. But I wasn't naive. Even though throughout my tenure I had the support of the majority of the Senate, including even one Republican, I knew that I was in for a bumpy tenure. I knew that every decision I made would be challenged. I knew that my confirmation hearing would be a showcase for Republicans to express their condemnation of my ethics, my judgment, and my patriotism. I knew that there would be repeated calls for me to resign by the management bar, by business groups, and I was fine with all of it. I was consistent and adamant throughout my tenure. I would unhesitatingly step down if I failed a confirmation vote or the Supreme Court invalidated my appointment. But here's the big thing that I didn't foresee, that push in the small of my back would come from my own team. In fact, it was Democrats who sent me flying under the bus. So long story short, the political pressure on the situation kept rising. Republicans weren't going to relent on the filibuster, and no one knew how the court would rule on the constitutional issue. So Senator Reid felt like he had to do something to bring the situation to a head. He started to threaten to go nuclear. That is, he would ask his caucus to support changing the Senate rules so that nominations couldn't be filibustered. And he believed that he had the votes to get the rule change through. But there are many institutionalists in the Senate, and they asked him to at least try to come to a compromise with the Republicans before he pulled the trigger on the nuclear option. So all 100 senators met for a special session in the old Senate chamber to try to work out a deal. And representatives of the president were involved too. From what I heard, there was lots of support for the board expressed by Democratic senators and for us as the nominees. But a compromise took shape. The Republicans would agree to confirm a full slate of NLRB members and Tom Perez as Secretary of Labor, who Republicans had also been filibustering. But Democrats had to agree that the nominees confirmed would not be the nominees who had accepted the recess appointments. I wasn't in the room, but my understanding was that Senator Reid was willing to go either way, blow up the rule on filibustering nominations or cut the deal. But after many hours of debate, cooler, that is, institutionalist heads prevailed, and the decision was made by both Senate Democrats and the White House to take the deal. So very early the next morning, I got a call from the president's chief of staff to let me know that I was out. The president was going to withdraw my nomination and nominate someone else. I wasn't surprised, but I was shocked. I had been hearing before the meeting in the Senate chamber that Democrats were going to hang tough. I felt hurt, embarrassed, and betrayed. People who told me that they would stand up for me had folded. I had gone, I thought, out on a limb for the administration, and they had cut that limb off behind me. If you think I had fun sitting in meeting after meeting being lectured by Republican senators about my lack of respect for the Constitution, you would be wrong. I thought I was tough and could handle people impugning my integrity to my face when I believed that I was in the right, but my defiant spirit was challenged. I experienced a terrible family tragedy in the midst of all of this political drama, so my emotional reserves were somewhat depleted. So let's go back to the bus metaphor. I came to my senses to realize that I was under the bus. No big surprise, it just plain hurts to get hit by a bus. Buses are big and hard and unforgiving. I was angry with the bus and with whoever had pushed me. Standing on the corner right before my rendezvous with the bus, I thought I had been presentable and respectable. I believed that I had a good reputation among my peers and communities, but now I felt like I was lying in the street, worried that I was covered by dirt and debris. And like I said, I was embarrassed and scared. As I was lying there staring at the bus's undercarriage, I wondered, did people know that I was pushed? Or did they think that I had stupidly walked out into traffic of my own accord? Were they wondering why I got pushed? Did they think that I had done something to deserve such treatment? There are big advantages to being run over by a metaphorical bus instead of a real one. First, while it hurts, it doesn't actually do physical damage. Second, you have a little bit of time before you have to crawl out from under the bus and face all the people staring at you. And it was in that time that I learned so much about myself and my career. So here's what I learned that I think, or at least I hope, might be helpful for you. First, I learned not to make big decisions when you're angry or hurt or in a place of great emotion. My first inclination when I realized that I was under the bus was to crawl out and crawl away from the people who had pushed me. Really? Who needs to work long hours for relatively low pay? If they don't want me, I thought, I don't want them. I can find a new team to join, maybe the private sector team where the offices are bigger and the pay is better. And while I was itching to let everyone who I thought had let me down know what I thought of them in that moment, something in me told me to take a beat and stay quiet for a little while, and I'm very glad I did. My mother had always told me, don't burn bridges. So here's some extra advice. Listen to your mother. Usually she knows what she's talking about. Second, I learned that I had a lot of really wonderful friends and colleagues. Almost as soon as I realized what had happened, I could see hands reaching under the bus to let me know that they were there for me when I was ready to emerge. A large care package arrived the very first day after the bus accident from a group of friends. It was packed with whiskey and chocolate-covered pretzels and Jane Austen novels. My friends knew just what I needed. These were all people who had important jobs and busy lives, but they had dropped everything to send a signal that they were thinking about me. They didn't force me to see them or talk before I was ready. I have tried to emulate their grace and kindness when I have friends who find themselves in tough spots, to just show up even when you don't know what to say. So I also learned how to be an even better friend in return. So make sure you make time to be a good friend, even when you're crazy busy building the important careers that you no doubt all will have. Third, I learned that I was more than my job. My friends showed up and let me know that they were willing to help, even though they didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know. They didn't know who I was going to be, but it didn't matter. They just wanted me to know that they were there. I honestly wasn't sure that was going to be true. I had spent a lot of years working very hard and very long hours, as I'm sure you all will too. When you work that much, the people you work with become your best friends. It's natural. You share values, you share experiences, and you don't get out a lot to spend time with many other people. They can even become like a surrogate family. To be clear, I had a wonderful family at the time who were very supportive, but I spent a lot more time with my work family than my real family. And so I had a moment of panic that I was going to lose not just my job, but also my friends, my tribe, my sense of myself. Would I fall off the radar of people I cared about? Would I be on the outside looking in at all the cool things that my friends were doing, but they weren't going to be looking out at me? The depth and sincerity of the outpouring assured me that although things might change if I chose to leave public service, that we had a depth of connection that would endure. So my advice to you is not to fight mixing work and deep friendships. Don't force yourself to compartmentalize your life, as many people will advise you to do. Having your colleagues be your close friend makes the work a lot more fun. But one thing to watch out for, avoid people who you suspect are transactional, who seem more interested in just who you are than why you are who you are. They won't be the people who will lend a hand when you're under the bus and your future is uncertain. I also learned in that time that sometimes you just have to get over yourself. As I was steaming and perseverating about what had happened, I was making myself the center of the drama. It was all about what had happened to me and how wrong it was. But with a little bit of time, I began to see a different picture alongside my own drama. It was a picture of extraordinary support for the National Labor Relations Board. I went to talk to my staff at the board shortly after and told them that I genuinely believed that what had happened was overall a good thing. This small New Deal era agency had brought the DC political world to a standstill. It brought all 100 senators into a room together. That never happens. And for hours, late into the night, even into the next morning, Democratic senator after senator gave impassioned speeches about how important the NLRB was and how they were willing to blow up Senate rules, which they are not inclined to do, to make sure that working people in our country had a right to form unions. That was an awesome thing for someone like me who cares deeply about that right. But I couldn't see that picture while I was focused only on myself. So context matters, and it's critically important that you're seeing the big picture when you make a big decision about your life and your career. So during that quiet time, while I huddled under the bus assessing the damage, most importantly, I learned just how much being a public servant meant to me. As I started to be able to hear sounds other than the roar of my own fear and anger, I heard the beginnings of conversations about what could come next for me. I pretty quickly realized that switching sides and going into big law on the management side, it wasn't going to be for me. But what about a union side or a plaintiff side firm or a nonprofit? That way, I thought, I could still turn my back on those who I thought did me wrong, but continue to do work that aligned with my values. But as I forced myself to really think about what I wanted to do, I realized that there were only two calls that intrigued me. The one from the Chief of Staff and the one that I got from the newly confirmed Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, an HLS alum, of course. Even though one of them had given me the push and the other had benefited from the push, I knew that I had to talk to them. So the Chief of Staff assured me that he and the President, I'm sure he was just saying the President, but hoped that I would stay on the team and that they would work with me to find a new place on the team. And then I talked to Tom Perez. He said, I just got a cool new job and I hear you are in need of a job. I went to see him in his office at the Justice Department that he was packing up to make the move to Department of Labor. He gave me a hug and then he launched into telling me all the big plans he had to marshal the power of the Department of Labor to make life better for working people. I don't know if any of you know Tom, but his energy is boundless and his optimism is infectious. So before he even formally asked me to come to DOL with him to help realize this vision, I knew what I was going to say. There was no way I was going to miss the opportunity to continue to serve. The thing about being a public service servant is that you get to think about the law in a different way than in almost any other role. Your North Star is doing what is right, not just winning. You strategize against the big picture, not just the facts in front of you in the moment. And you have the potential for impact at a scale that is rare to have anywhere else. But even more importantly than that, and the professional satisfaction that can come from participating in consequential government actions, is the feeling that public service gives you of actually participating in our democracy. I believe deeply that to have a well-functioning society, we need to invest together in a government that is capable of providing for the common good. So for me, public service has been the way that I have made that investment. And so in that moment, when I had to make a decision, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I dusted myself off, I put on a brave face, and I climbed out from under the bus and into the next chapter of my career. And I can say without hesitation that working with Tom in the second term of the Obama administration was a remarkable experience, and I have never regretted my choice for a moment. Now, you might not have thought about it this way, but by being here today, by making it through HLS to graduation in 2024, you have also climbed out from under a bus that the universe kind of threw you under. For many of you, you went through college, at least in part during COVID, which must have really sucked compared to the college experience you thought you would have. And then as the pandemic ebbed, you were here in this remarkable place, only to have your third year of law school happen in the midst of such a challenging and for many painful time on campus. But you have shown such great resilience. You have come out from under that bus. I have seen it in the way you have shown up for each other, in the way that you have continued to do good work and put yourself out there, and to push all of us in this community to do good work along with you. So I'm going to end where maybe you always thought that I would, with a plea that you take the precious commodity you have of your wonderful selves and amazing potential and use it to do good in the world. Do what you care most about. I'm not going to tell you what that is. If you want to be a labor lawyer, that's awesome. I would love that. But do what you care most about that can have a positive impact on others. And I would bet that if you do, you won't ever regret your career choices either, even if you momentarily find yourself under a bus.